It is the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. We're here every single day from 5 to 6 talking about the local issues that matter to you most and taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. Your emails as well at randykabc@gmail.com. That's randykabc@gmail.com. Boy, is this year going fast. Can you believe it? Tomorrow is going to be
5 weeks
until Election Day. You heard me right. Tomorrow is
5 weeks
until Election Day. We are getting that close, which means it's crunch time, which means there are a lot of campaigns that are finally starting to get real active. And one of those happens to be the campaign for Los Angeles County District Attorney. You know, the office held by this guy.
Google on YouTube.
This guy.
So we're mindful of all these things, but
And of course, this guy.
we got some wobbly knees allies.
Last night, George Gascon and Nathan Hochman took the stage at a debate hosted by ABC7 Eyewitness News and the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Mark Brown, as the moderator. And most people didn't even know this was happening. So luckily, I downloaded it. I caught up all the clips. We played a few of them on John's show, but I get so much more because I want to hear what the DAs have to say about street takeovers, about homelessness, home burglaries, even violence on Metro. We're going to get into all of that. By the way, if you don't know who Mark Brown is, he's this guy.
Naked and unafraid and just a feet away from the Beverly Hills border. As the tents go up, the clothes come off, and now outraged locals are fighting back against the nudity, narcotics, and negative impact on their businesses.
And since we are 5 weeks from Election Day, which is actually, I think, in just over a week, ballots are going in the mail. People are going to start voting. If you want to make your pitch, either for Hochman or for Gascon or for neither, this is your opportunity to do so. If you want to persuade some of the persuadables out there to why you think they should vote for Hochman, they should keep Gascon in, or they should vote for neither of them because you don't like anybody, well, this is your opportunity to make your pitch at 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. Let's hear what George Gasconi has to say about people that are repeat thieving so much that we get to the point where you have a Rite Aid in Compton, and this gets name-checked, that has locked up every single thing in the store. In January, we went from locking up the socks.
How ghetto does it look that they have to lock up the socks?
And now, in October, everything is getting locked up at a Rite Aid. Let's hear what Gascon has to say.
So there are plenty of videos showing groups of people robbing stores while destroying property. For example, we have seen stores lock up their goods in glass in cases. And there's a well-known example of a Rite Aid store in Compton of that. And also a ceviche place in Culver City closed after 4 times of robberies and attacks.
Okay, that's where it's gone too far. Ceviche is incredible. I love ceviche. A ceviche place had to go out of business because they got robbed 4 times? That's on you, Gascon.
Just in a couple of months. So, in your view, what needs to be done to stop these reoccurring crimes and keep businesses safe? Mr. Gascon first.
Yeah, so we saw organized retail theft increase during the pandemic.
Oh, that's right. I don't know if you're aware of this, but retail theft is a side effect of COVID. Because every time Gascon gets asked about retail theft and the rise in property crimes during his tenure, he blames it on the coronavirus. What the connection is, I don't know.
Right.
But that's what Gascon says. You get the COVID and you want to steal.
Nationwide, and our community was the same. We also heard the same issues that were being brought up by retailers, and that concern resulted in a variety of task forces that were put together by the LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, the CHP, and others.
Oh, you mean the task force that George Gascon was not invited to the press conference for? The one by Karen Bass? And you want to talk about organizing retail theft, organizing the response to organized retail theft? Gavin Newsom put out a whole bunch of grants to different cities and counties, to law enforcement agencies, to start cracking down on organized retail theft. And of course, the big headline was that Shang Tao's office in Oakland couldn't file the paperwork.
Absolutely.
But as big of a headline, not as funny, was George Gascon's office straight up refused the money. refused grant money from the state of California because he said we didn't need to waste the resources of the state on that.
We actually funnel all those cases through our organized crime division. We have prosecuted over 11,000 cases involving the area of retail theft, about 1,500 that are directly ORT.
So only 10% of the retail theft cases that you're talking about are organized retail theft. So what is the other 90%?
But in addition to the prosecutions that some have led anywhere from jail time to prison time, we have also worked with the California legislation to create legislation that address the areas that we needed to see improvement on in how to deal with repeat offenders.
I got to say, Gascon endorsing the package of bills that the legislature passed that Gavin Newsom signed isn't a great sign. Could be why Prop 36 has 71% support.
The reality is that organized retail theft is much more complex, and even retailers will often tell you that they don't have a way to distinguish between inventory shrinkage and that is being stolen from shoplifters.
Okay, I don't know about that one. It's pretty obvious what's getting stolen. Shrinkage is, employees stealing things or stuff falling off the shelves and breaking. But okay, that's what Gascon had to say. Now let's hear what his opponent has to say, Nathan Hochman.
Mr. Hochman, retail theft.
Yes, I had a chance to speak to over 100 7-Eleven franchisee owners.
That's a lot of cashiers.
And they told me that with each franchise, they have put their life savings into these franchises. And they have said that at this point, they don't even report.
I got to say, and this is just an aside, if you're going to get into the franchise business, the amount of people that decide what they're going to put their life savings into is a Subway or a 7-Eleven, I just don't get it.
And they have said that...
Although I think those are cheaper than some of the other franchises, but, Subway, they put way too many of them and they're not profitable. And 7-Eleven is the most vulnerable target to any kind of crime. And this is pre-Gascon.
And they have said that at this point, they don't even report the type of theft that goes on there. Because they used to report it, and the police would say, look, Gascon doesn't prosecute. So why are we even taking the report? Now they don't even prosecute. They don't even give the report to the police. And I asked them, well, why don't you at least want an insurance claim? They said, look, the insurance policy deductible would eat up the entire loss.
And then you get dropped. You can't do that.
And if we even filed it, our insurance policy would be canceled.
All right, he's doing well on this answer. Earlier in the debate, Nathan Hochman was throwing out some dumb slogans and some bad catchphrases and even some bad puns. But at least this, he's on message, he's on point.
Those folks look at me, I look at them, and they say, you got to do something. You got to get rid of this Gascon, who's implemented policies that have sent a message emboldening criminals to go ahead and take and engage in this type of theft, knowing that even if they get arrested, they'll be arrested in the morning and out by the afternoon. So again, we can change those policies by holding people proportionally and smartly accountable with a hard middle approach.
Okay, I don't know who exactly is the campaign advisor for Nathan Hochman. Hard middle, bad name. Does not snap. It sounds a little weird. I'd skip that.
With a hard middle approach.
Stop it with the hard middle.
How do you do that?
Ooh, that's a great follow-up that I wish Mark Brown, I wish I had this on speed dial anytime we're doing any kind of debate or interview.
How do you do that?
Perfect follow-up. I love that man.
The way you do it is you do it in several ways. So, for instance, let's start with juveniles who steal just under $950. Right now, Mr. Gascon has a blanket policy. He says under no circumstances will that juvenile be prosecuted for doing it. And by the way, that is a problem that parents are facing. Because parents are trying to teach their kids the difference between right and wrong, and then stealing has consequences. And Mr. Gascon's own policies say no. You can go ahead and steal. There are no consequences.
Yeah, but I don't know if the parenting aspect of that, and I don't know. I mean, you can make the argument that if kids are doing this, well, their parents are not that invested.
So we can again,
or they're totally fine with it.
So we can again bring back those smart policies, and we're not going to put them in prison. But we are going to institute community service, restitution, pay it back, or if they do have a drug addiction and we're stealing for that reason, give them the...
I would imagine most of the 17-year-olds that are doing the boosting, they're not hooked on fentanyl.
Give them the choice. You can go through a diversion program, or you can go to jail. And that diversion program, that rehab program that used to work, we used to graduate hundreds of people through drug court, through an 18-month rehab program, has been gutted by Mr. Gascon's policies.
All right, there you go. There's the difference. There's the two candidates. Gascon says, well, it was all because of COVID, and I'm already doing stuff that's going great. And Hochman says, we got to go back to the stuff we were doing that made a lot more sense until Gascon changed it. Seems like a pretty clear difference to me. Let's go to Gascon, who gets a rebuttal because he was name-checked, because that's how these debates work. It's so silly.
Mr. Gascon, I'll give you a minute to respond.
Sure. My opponent has a disconnection with the truth, and he also has a failure to understand California law, especially as it relates to juveniles. The reality is that...
Gascon's tick, and it drives me crazy, and it's super manipulative, is to start every response with what the reality is.
Quite frankly...
Because Gascon is the absolute arbiter of reality.
The reality is that juveniles do not get a free pass. They get...
Every single report on the nightly news would beg to differ.
They get prosecuted under the juvenile system, and they're held accountable for their crimes when they get caught and they're arrested by the police. However, the juvenile laws are very complex, and I understand that my opponent has never prosecuted a juvenile case, nor has ever...
You've never prosecuted our case, but, you know, we know that already.
However...
People knew that in 2020, and they still voted for him.
However, the juvenile laws are very complex, and I understand that my opponent has never prosecuted a juvenile case, nor has ever worked on having to file a juvenile case. But the reality is that the system for juveniles is very, very different. First of all, a lot of the information is not shared publicly. Secondly, there is a presumption of rehabilitation on the work. And thirdly, when we're looking at juveniles, we're always looking also at who are the adults that are involved in the case, and are there other people that should be held accountable for this case. But again, I understand that my opponent is completely disconnected from reality and doesn't understand the law often when it comes to state law.
So Gascon's response is Nathan Hochman is a stupid liar who's disconnected from reality. Okay, then. This debate is getting very civil. I got a lot of sound from this debate that I have been meaning to get to because I need to hear, although I'm pretty sure I know what I'm doing on Election Day. There may be some people out there that maybe you heard something from Hochman that pissed you off in the past. Maybe you need to hear more from Hochman to make sure that you feel confident in that vote. But that's what we're here to do, here to give you the candidates in their own words. This is a very consequential race, the race for Los Angeles County District Attorney, and who knows what the polling is saying at this point. This is up to you. So if you'd like to make your case for why you're voting for Hochman, why you're voting against Gascon, why you're voting for Gascon, why you hate them both, this is your opportunity to do so. At 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. And if you're still making up your mind, well, don't you worry, because I got Gascon and Hochman on street takeovers, on homelessness, on Metro, and home burglaries, topics that we talk about every week on this radio station. Let's hear what they have to say. Let's see what their perspectives are, and let's make a decision. It is the News Blitz with Randy Wang, 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. If you want to make your case for who you're voting for in the DA's race, now's your opportunity, 800-222-KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. We're going through the debate that took place last night on ABC 7 between George Gascon and Nathan Hochman, an issue that we've been talking about repeatedly since the very first week of the News Blitz with Randy Wang has been the scourge of street takeovers in Southern California and Northern California. It drives me crazy that we can't come up with a solution to stop these things. Let's hear what Gascon has to say about street takeovers in LA County.
Let's take it to the street. Street racing and takeovers, complex crimes that usually involve large groups of people organizing in social media. We have seen these groups become increasingly violent. You may remember back in January when a crowd at one of these sideshows ransacked a Mexican bakery in Compton, a business that has served...
Boy, Compton's getting all kinds of shout-outs in this debate.
A business that has served the community for over 50 years with apparently no prior problems like this. Many of the people participating in these events are minors or young adults who may not have engaged in more serious crimes before.
And according to the LAPD, they're all car enthusiasts.
So how should they be dealt with by the district attorney's office? And more importantly, what can the DA's office do to crack down on these street takeovers?
Well, first of all, they don't get in. If they get arrested, and again, we have to assume that there is an arrest. Just because you're a juvenile does not mean that you get a free pass. Under the juvenile system, there are laws to deal with the problems, right? Sometimes, frankly, we have prosecuted cases where this has led to someone's death, right? But most of the time, thankfully, that's not the case. When the police makes an arrest and they're presented to us, if there are felony arrests in the parts where we have, felonies, we have jurisdiction over the county. If there are misdemeanors in the areas where we have misdemeanor jurisdiction, where we don't, obviously, is
This is a run-out-the-clock answer. George Gascon does not want to answer the question or has no policy to tell you, he goes into a long diatribe how you're too stupid to understand that the DA's office only prosecutes misdemeanors in certain parts of the county that don't have their own city attorney. He does this in every interview. He does this in every debate. He is not giving a substantive answer to the question, how do we deal with the street takeovers and the jackass kids that participate in them?
If there are misdemeanors in the areas where we have misdemeanor jurisdiction, where we don't, obviously, is handled by city attorneys in different parts, but they do get held accountable, and they will continue to be held accountable.
And that's why they stop going. Oh, no, wait, they happen every weekend.
The other part, too, is how do we prevent this thing from occurring in the first place? So engaging in public education, working with community.
What does that mean? Now we're getting into cliche territory. Don't make me whip out the bontas.
Working with the police to make sure that these crimes are being prevented in the first place. That is also things that we're responsible for, and we do. Again, just because you're a juvenile does not mean that you do not face consequences. The consequences should be appropriate to your age.
Somewhere in that minute 49 was some semblance of an answer, but maybe I just wasn't paying close enough attention. I don't know. That's what George Gascon had to say about what he is doing to stop the street takeovers. And as you can tell, street takeovers exploding in popularity in the last 3 years. George Gascon's doing a heck of a job at it.
Right.
We'll get to what Hochman has to say about street takeovers. Again, I consider this one of the more important issues because it's one of these things that just illustrates lawlessness. It leads to the looting of the 7-Elevens and the gas stations. And it seems like there has to be a better way to deal with this. These things should be shut down entirely. Block off every actual route to the intersection. Get as much manpower as you can. Tow every single vehicle of every attendee and every participant. You are using your car in committing of a crime. Bye-bye. But I'm not in charge here. One of these two is going to be in charge. So we'll hear what Hochman has to say about the street takeovers. But first, how about this? 790 KABC welcomes John Waite at the Oxnard Performing Arts Center this Friday, October 4th. Tickets are on sale now at AXS.com, but right now, caller number 9 at 1-888-790-5222 gets a pair of tickets to the show. Tickets furnished by The Canyon, where music meets the soul. Good luck dialing. We're going through the debate between Nathan Hochman and George Gascon that aired last night on ABC7 Eyewitness News. We'll hear what Gascon has to say about homelessness, the metro, home burglaries. We'll get all of that from Hochman too, plus his response to street takeovers. All coming up next. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. It is the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. We're here every single day from 5 to 6 talking about the local issues that matter to you most and taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC. 1-800-222-5222. Your emails as well at randykabc@gmail.com. That's randykabc@gmail.com. We're going through last night's debate between George Gascon.
We got some wobbly knees allies.
And Nathan Hochman. I don't have a drop for him, but if he keeps saying hard middle, I'm going to turn it into a drop because that is a foolish tagline. Let's hear what Nathan Hochman has to say about street takeovers.
Mr. Hochman?
So I visited with Ruben Martinez Jr. and Sr., who run the iconic Ruben's Bakery in Compton. Then on the early morning hours of January 2nd, had a 13-year-old ram a Kia into that grate. They estimate over...
Just had to be a Kia, didn't it? If you're on the board of directors for Kia in South Korea, how does it feel knowing that your brand has become a punchline to every crime story in California?
They estimate over 100 juveniles ran in, ransacked the place, and what have been the consequences? Well, for the 13-year-old, he actually got held responsible. For the 100 of kids who ran in, nothing. Because again, Mr. Gascon has a policy. It's right there in black and white. It says juveniles will not be prosecuted for misdemeanors.
Unless the case makes it to the TV. You could definitely make that point, that if a case makes it on the news, Gascon has to do something about it, just like he's throwing the book at the Metro bus hijacker today because everyone's paying attention to that story. Janice Hahn even showed up to the presser to make sure Gascon charged this guy with murder.
And by the way, the LA DA's office is the only one with jurisdiction over juveniles. And the LA DA's office has jurisdiction over 78 of the 88 cities because they don't have city attorney's offices. So Mr. Gascon's policies dealing with juveniles that have effectively said, go ahead and commit these misdemeanors. Misdemeanors involve street takeovers. Misdemeanors involve stealing just under $950. So that when the Martinezes are talking to me, they're saying, we got to do something about this, and it starts with getting rid of Mr. Gascon.
So what do you propose we do with those 13-year-old kids?
Every follow-up for Hochman is, okay, so what would you actually do about the problem? Don't just tell me how awful Gascon is. You can't win with that. What would you do differently?
So again, we have to hold those 13-year-old kids responsible. And by the way, it was...
Hey, he didn't say accountable.
And by the way, it was 13, probably up to 17. But here's how we hold them responsible. That is that hard middle approach.
Oh, God. Well, I did say if he kept saying it, I was going to have to turn it into a drop.
That is that hard middle approach.
Nathan Hochman, welcome to the Wall of Fame.
That is that hard middle approach.
Stop with the hard middle, buddy.
It does not go to mass incarceration. And shame on you, Mr. Gascon. How many times do I have to say I reject your extreme policy and mass incarceration? Because what hard middle policies are about...
Oh, God. It goes to show you just how unpopular Gascon is that the polls show Hochman this far ahead, because Hochman is not a good candidate.
Because what hard middle policies are about or what prosecutors have done. Now, Mr. Gascon has never been a prosecutor, so he wouldn't understand what I'm talking about, and I have. But that hard middle approach says, look.
Oh, God. Okay, that's the third time he said hard middle in this 1-minute response. You gotta stop.
Says, look. If someone violates society's laws, they have to pay that debt back to society. And it might be community service would be the punishment. It might be restitution. Have those people, if they stole $100, pay that $100 back. It might be, again, a diversion program if they have a drug addiction, and that's while it's stealing. But again, you cannot go ahead and say to juveniles, nothing will happen. Because then you deal with a situation where parents are trying to teach their kids right from wrong, and the DA's office is sending a different message.
Okay.
Yeah, that's still on the parents, though. I don't care what the DA does. If your kid is participating in this nonsense, if they're looting a 7-Eleven, that's not all on Gascon. That's on you, buddy. All right, Mr. Hard Middle. Of course, he name-checked Gascon a bunch of times, so now Gascon gets the rebuttal. I wonder if this is part of the strategy. Name-check Gascon every time so he talks more, because the more Gascon talks, the more people can't stand him.
Before we go to break, I'll give you one more chance to address that.
Sure. Well, my opponent continues to mischaracterize not only the policies but the law. Yes, we have full jurisdiction over juveniles around the county. It is also true that while we have misdemeanor jurisdiction over 78 cities, about 50% of the county population, about 5 million, have misdemeanor prosecutors simply because the larger cities have their own.
Again, you're answering the question by not saying anything that we didn't already know.
Our policy, very clear, creates exceptions when it's necessary to prosecute. But even in the cases that are not prosecuted, It's not that the person gets out of jail without there's no free pass. They still have, as thankfully Mr. Hochman recognized, perhaps.
Oh, yeah. There's a thing that Gascon's been doing in this debate, and it's such a lame strategy. Purposely mispronouncing your opponent's name. Newsom was doing this in that stupid debate that he and DeSantis participated in on Fox News for some reason. Oh, how the mighty have fallen on both sides of that. Everyone involved in that debate, how the mighty have fallen. Hannity, too.
As thankfully Mr. Hochman recognized, perhaps diversion is appropriate, education is appropriate. People get held accountable.
Gascon's going to come to the schools and he's going to have a seminar why it's a bad idea to participate in street takeovers. That'll do it.
People get held accountable, but it's important also to go back and recognize that the way the system works, first of all, there has to be an arrest. In the case of juveniles, when the arrest occurs, they are given to the juvenile probation department. It is the juvenile probation department that makes a decision as to whether to bring the case to the prosecutors or not, but I understand that Mr. Hochman has never dealt with juvenile law, and he obviously doesn't understand it.
Mr. Haka. Now we're calling him Mr. Haka. Okay, then. This is the election, folks. It's a binary choice. You got two bad choices. One of them's worse. Let's go to Bill in La Cañada. Bill, hello.
Hey, Randy, I think that endorsements are really important, and Gascon's got a new radio ad that's really got me thinking seriously about him. Check it out. How you doing? The name's Luigi. I'm with Jailbirds for George. We think Gascon should stick around as District Attorney, and so does our buddies, Bobby the Bucketful Bonta, Gavin the Gas Bag Newsom, and Adam the Bull Schiff. George is a man of action. When a deputy DA misgendered a convicted child predator who also bashed a guy's head in with a rock, George suspended the gender bully without pay and sent the sex offender to a ladies' prison. Yeah, that's why we support George Gascon, and we think you should too, if you know what's good for you. Yeah. I'm George Gascon, and I really, really like this ad, right?
That's pretty good. Thanks for the call, Bill. Appreciate it. I really appreciate how accurate the information in that ad was about the case of Mr. Tubbs. Yeah, that was a real thing that happened. Oh, wow. Hey, you never know what you're going to get when you pick up that phone and answer live radio. 800-222-KABC. 1-800-222-5222. Gascon and Hochman on Metro next. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. As we go through last night's debate between George Gascon and Nathan Hochman, we heard what both candidates had to say about street takeovers. How about the violence on the Metro? Like, I don't know, the hijacking that took place last week.
Josh, your question for Mr. Gascon.
D.A. Gascon, last week, a Metro bus was hijacked and a passenger was murdered. Violence on Metro trains and buses has been an ongoing issue. If elected, how would you help address this issue that is plaguing our public transit system?
Look, I mean, this is a horrible situation. As you will know, it's not the first one that has occurred.
Second one this year.
And we're prosecuting those cases when there is an arrest very aggressively because we all depend on having a healthy public transport. The problems with our public transportation are many. There are obviously some problems, and there's different conversations about who should police the services, whether they should have their own policing or not. But what we do is we work closely with both law enforcement and the Metro system in order to make sure that when people are getting arrested, that they're being prosecuted appropriately. As a matter of fact, the case that you bring up is a case that we anticipate that will be presented to our office tomorrow. And based on the evidence, the case will be aggressively prosecuted as we have.
Well, of course, that one's in the news. How about all the stabbings that we don't get massive coverage for?
As we have previous similar cases. But again, the complexities of this entire system require that people understand the roles, that they work together, and that we bring to bear all the services that we have in order to make sure that our public transport system is safe.
Okay, then. Let's go to Barney in Sherman Oaks. Barney, hello.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on that street takeover business.
Yeah.
I think something that would probably put a stop to a lot of that is confiscate the cars and either take them and sell them or crush them. They'd think twice about showing up at one of those things if their neat car got mashed.
Oh, yeah. And in the latest LAPD task force briefing with the LA City Council Transportation Committee, apparently that used to be the policy, especially with street racing going back for 20, 30 years. But apparently there's been a moratorium on confiscating the cars, and no one seems to know why.
Well, they're murder weapons, You're
totally right. Barney, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate it. When we come back, we'll hear what Mr. Hochman has to say about Metro, and we'll get the candidates' takes on home burglaries, something that's very important to residents of Encino and Sherman Oaks. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. We're going through last night's debate between Nathan Hochman and George Gasconi. Let's hear what Hochman has to say about violence on the Metro.
Mr. Hochman.
It's interesting that Mr. Gascon acknowledges that these situations are complex, yet he's used blanket policies to deal with so many aspects of crime. So if it's gang members that are actually participating in these crimes on the Metro, Mr. Gascon has this blanket policy not to treat it complexly or go ahead and use my hard middle approach of looking at...
Oh, you've got to stop that. Enough with the hard middle.
That is that hard middle approach.
Nobody is buying the hard middle approach. That is a bad name. It is not tested. You got to stop it.
Of looking at all the factors, but just to say up front to those criminals, we're not prosecuting you for that. If it's juveniles who are getting on and committing misdemeanors on those buses, again, Mr. Gascon's message is not complex. It is very straightforward. You will not be prosecuted. So it's not a problem with law enforcement doing its job. Law enforcement very often does its job and brings those cases to the DA's office only to have them rejected.
Or pushed down to misdemeanors.
In fact, right now, there's over 10,000 unfiled cases where law enforcement has actually brought the case to the DA's office, but because of Mr. Gascon's system, those cases have not been reviewed.
Josh, you got a follow-up?
Yeah, but Mr. Hochman, we routinely hear that people don't feel safe on the Metro, and many don't have a choice. They have to take it. What would you do?
Hochman's strategy in this debate is spend the whole first part of the question bashing Gascon. Then, because he didn't actually answer what he would do differently, he gets another minute.
Don't feel safe on the Metro, and many don't have a choice. They have to take it. What would you do to secure our public transportation system?
So the message ultimately has to be sent to the criminals, the people who are actually hurting the people on the Metro. They have to understand that law enforcement will do its job, and that if we need more law enforcement, we will work. I will work to make sure that law enforcement has the resources to get to the various parts of the Metro system, whether it's the subways, whether it's the buses, whether it's the Metro line.
Well, right now, we're only using overtime police officers with this bizarre contract between LAPD, Long Beach PD, and the county sheriff. You could say, well, maybe we should do away with that, go back to just the sheriffs until they can build up their own police force. But there's also the complexity of the fact that every policing agency in the state is understaffed.
But then when those cases get brought to the DA's office, what I'll also ensure is that they get the appropriate look. There will be no blanket policy saying we're not going to prosecute certain crimes up front, because that is literally a message to law enforcement and the criminals that if you go ahead and commit these crimes, you will do so with impunity. So again, we can work with law enforcement to build up their ranks and then make sure when those cases come to the DA's office, these folks don't get arrested in the morning and under Mr. Gascon's policies released in the afternoon.
And there might be something to the point that you might get a little morale boost and people might want to work for this agency, work for one of the police agencies in this county if they know that they're going to actually be able to put people away when they do arrest them. It's a big deal. All right, we got just enough time to hear what Gascon has to say about home burglaries.
Yes, D.A. Gascon, our reporters at Eyewitness News, including myself, have covered many home burglaries recently, including in the San Fernando Valley and places like Encino. In some cases, the criminals behind these break-ins are from another country, traveling here specifically to commit crimes, crime tourism.
That was another press conference Gascon wasn't allowed to be at.
Homeowners tell us they are scared. Some say they want to leave LA County. Some are considering buying firearms. Others are spending thousands of dollars on home security. As district attorney, how will you address these home burglaries, and what is your message to these concerned residents?
Well, look, first of all, my heart goes out for anyone that has been victimized, right? We know that a lot of this has occurred in the city of LA, and we actually know that home burglaries in the city of LA are down year to date.
No, they're not.
But that is not the answer for someone that had burglaries that occurred to their home.
Don't even start with the home burglaries are down. That's not going to fly here. Well, you got a little taste of Gascon. You got a little taste of Hochman. I don't love Hochman.
That is that hard middle approach.
But I really don't love Gascon.
We got some wobbly knees allies.
Ultimately, it's up to you to make your mind. Ballots go in the mail next week, and the election day, when it's all over, is 5 weeks from tomorrow. It's almost over, everybody. Then we can all enjoy the holidays and not have to think about politics for a while. How exciting is that going to be? Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you tomorrow at 5 for another News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC.